Single mother decides to take her twins to work, but was shocked when they hugged the company's billionaire CEO. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Jessica woke before dawn, the gray half-light of morning barely illuminating the cramped studio apartment she shared with her twins. The alarm's shrill ring cut through the quiet, followed by the echo of her own soft groan as she fumbled to silence it. Before she could fully open her eyes, the weight of the day's worries pressed against her. Bills were overdue, her inbox was full of reminders from the electric company, and the babysitter's availability was hanging on a thread. She sat up, blinking away the blur of sleep, and reached for her phone on the nightstand. A sense of dread fluttered in her stomach the moment she saw the messages. A half-dozen missed calls from unknown numbers likely belonged to bill collectors, and her bank balance was dangerously low. She rubbed her face, willing herself to stay calm, then slid out of bed, wincing at the chill on the floor. In the kitchen, a tiny table was covered with envelopes stamped with warnings. Rent, utilities, medical bills from that time Liam had come down with a raging ear infection. She pressed her lips into a thin line and scooped up the envelopes, stuffing them into a drawer as if hiding them could somehow erase them from existence. Behind her, she heard muffled giggles and the soft sound of tiny feet scurrying across the floor. Liam and Lily appeared in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, their eyes bright with that endless energy she admired and sometimes envied. She didn't want them seeing her so worried, so she forced a smile. "Morning, my loves," she said, opening her arms. They hurried over, Lily hugging Jessica's waist, Liam pressing his head to her side. The warmth of their embrace gave her a flicker of strength. Just then, her phone buzzed. A text. She pulled free of the hug and squinted at the screen. It was her babysitter. Her heart fluttered hopefully, only to be replaced by dread. The babysitter was sick and couldn't watch the twins today, or for the rest of the week. Jessica stared at her phone for a moment, unbelieving, before letting out a shaky exhale. She had no backup plan. She had no family nearby and certainly couldn't afford any last-minute childcare service. The twins were still clinging to her, so she summoned a reassuring tone. "Okay, guys, listen up," she said softly. "We're going on an adventure today. Mommy has to take you to work." Liam blinked with curiosity, while Lily's smile broadened. "Will there be snacks?" Lily asked, the question both innocent and heartbreakingly direct, because Lily knew their fridge was often emptier than it should be. Jessica stroked her daughter's hair and nodded. "I'll pack some snacks, but I need you both to stay quiet and behave, all right? It's very important." Within minutes, she was piling crackers, fruit, and water bottles into small bags for the twins. They gathered coloring books and crayons, though she had no idea how much that would keep them occupied in an office setting. She tried not to think about the possible fallout. This job was her lifeline, the one thing keeping them afloat. If her boss discovered she was making the office a makeshift daycare, it could be disastrous, but she had no alternative. Pushing past her anxiety, she ushered the twins out the door, down the stuffy hallway, and into the old elevator that rattled ominously. By the time they reached the lobby, Liam was tugging on her coat sleeve, and Lily was already whispering about how hungry she was. Jessica swallowed, praying she'd have time to feed them properly once they reached the office. A gust of urban morning air greeted them as they stepped out into the street. The sidewalk was crowded with people hurrying to their jobs, none of them looking particularly cheerful. Jessica tightened her grip on the twins' hands, navigating them toward the bus stop. At this hour, the bus was inevitably jam-packed, standing room only. She managed to get them on, pressing her body against the metal pole to steady herself. Lily clung to her leg, and Liam tried his best not to bump the other passengers. The driver started and stopped abruptly through rush-hour traffic. Jessica could feel the pointed stares. She imagined the judgments. Why bring children onto a crowded morning bus? But what choice did she have? She simply lowered her gaze, focusing on not stumbling, counting the blocks until they reached the tall, glass-fronted building where she worked. Once inside the lobby, the security guard, a kind man named Carlos, offered them a nod. He didn't ask any questions, though Jessica sensed his concern. She mumbled a quick hello and headed for the elevator banks, heart pounding. The overhead lights in the elevator felt glaringly bright. She closed her eyes for a second, recentering herself. The twins pressed the button for her, excited by the glowing numbers. Their enthusiasm was infectious. It was moments like these that reminded her why she persevered no matter how bleak things seemed. On her floor, she led the kids down a corridor of cubicles. She spotted her desk near the window, where a faint sliver of sunlight occasionally warmed the gray carpet. Setting up the twins by her workstation wasn't ideal, but she couldn't let them wander around. She helped them spread a blanket on the floor in a corner. "Here," she murmured, handing Liam his crayons and Lily a bag of snacks. "Stay together, and please don't move around unless you tell me, okay?" The kids nodded. She tried a shaky smile. "We'll make this work." A co-worker strolled by, eyeing the twins. "Rough morning?" the co-worker asked with a note of sympathy. Jessica gave a tight nod. Another co-worker, one known for strict adherence to rules, cast a look of disapproval but said nothing. Jessica slipped into her chair, turning on her computer, trying to quell the rising panic in her chest. Maybe if she kept her head down, nobody would raise a fuss. Almost immediately, she spotted an urgent email flagged by her impatient boss. She scrolled through it, heart sinking as she realized he wanted a meeting first thing. "Great," she muttered under her breath. She mentally rehearsed what she might say if he asked about the twins. She couldn't lie, but how honest could she afford to be? Her desk phone rang, making her jump. It was her boss's assistant, instructing her to come to the boss's office right away. The unspoken message, trouble, was brewing. Jessica glanced over at Liam and Lily. Lily was rummaging for more snacks. Liam was drawing quietly. She knelt beside them, speaking in a low, urgent whisper. "I have to go talk to my boss. Stay here. Be as quiet as mice. Don't follow me. Understood?" They nodded seriously, sensing her worry. She rose and headed down the hall, each step feeling heavier than the last. Her mind buzzed with excuses. "It's an emergency. The babysitter canceled last minute." Would that be enough? She took a slow, deep breath, then paused at the door of the small, windowless room that served as her boss's personal office. Through the frosted glass pane, she could see movement, the silhouette of a figure pacing. She could practically feel the tension rolling off him. Forcing a moment of composure, she squared her shoulders. The handle felt cold beneath her fingertips. She turned it and stepped inside, her heart pounding like a drum. Immediately, she was met with an icy glare. Everything about his expression confirmed the worst. He was not in a forgiving mood, and today's conversation would decide more than just her schedule. Her boss's glare is the first thing she sees as she enters, and Jessica braces for the toughest conversation of her life. Jessica could feel the tension in the air the instant she closed the door behind her. Her boss stood behind his desk, arms crossed, anger simmering beneath a forced veneer of composure. The sight of his stern eyes nearly stopped her breath. She murmured a quick greeting, her voice trembling ever so slightly, then waited for the inevitable lecture. "Jessica, this is unacceptable," he began, each word clipped. "You know our policy. No children on the premises unless it's an emergency, and even then, you need prior approval." She swallowed hard. Her heart thumped. "I'm sorry. My babysitter canceled on me at the last minute. I tried to find someone else, but no one was available. I didn't have a choice." His gaze fell to the stack of papers on his desk. He tapped them impatiently with a fingertip. "If you want to remain at this company, you must respect the boundaries. Your home situation is your responsibility, not ours." Jessica forced herself not to flinch. "Yes, sir, I understand. Please, it's only temporary. I promise I'll figure something out by tomorrow." He studied her for a moment and she didn't dare breathe. Finally, he exhaled. Fine. Keep them quiet. Out of sight if possible. I'm giving you this one chance because I know you've worked hard here. But don't let this become a pattern. His tone left no room for doubt. She was on thin ice. Jessica bowed her head in gratitude. Thank you. I'll make sure they don't disturb anyone. She backed out of the office with relief pulsing through her. She'd managed to keep her job, at least for now. Her stomach churned at the thought of how long she could juggle this. If the babysitter didn't improve quickly, or if she couldn't find help soon, she might be forced to quit. And quitting wasn't an option, not with overdue bills piling up. When she returned to her desk, she saw Lily kneeling on the floor, arms folded in frustration, while Liam scoured the crumpled remains of some artwork they'd tried to tape together. A small cup lay overturned, pencils rolling away. Lily had clearly toppled it. Jessica felt a flood of anxiety. She knelt, quickly collecting the scattered pencils. "Lily, sweetheart, remember what we talked about?" Jessica whispered, trying to keep her voice calm. "You have to stay still, okay? This place isn't like home." Lily's lower lip trembled. "I'm sorry, Mommy. I just wanted the red pencil." Before Jessica could comfort her, a co-worker with a disapproving expression stomped by. "This is an office, not a playground," the co-worker muttered under her breath, loud enough for Jessica to hear. Jessica's shoulders stiffened, but she bit back a retort. She couldn't afford any more conflict, especially not today. She patted Lily's shoulder. "It's okay. Let's clean up." And so they did, dropping the pencils back into the cup and placing it well away from the children's reach. Jessica scanned the area, making sure everything was in order, then scooted the blanket closer to her chair. She reminded the twins to whisper if they needed anything. Before long, a slender woman named Marina strolled over. She was a friendly colleague who often shared a smile with Jessica in the break room. Spotting the twins, Marina crouched down with a grin. "Hi there, you two," she said softly. "I'm Marina. Did you bring crayons? I have some extra markers if you want them." Liam and Lily perked up, returning timid smiles. Jessica exhaled, grateful for an ally. Marina glanced at Jessica. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. Jessica offered a half smile in return. "I'm managing. Thanks for asking." "Hang in there," Marina whispered, passing a small pack of colored markers into Lily's eager hands. "You've got this." Then she returned to her own cubicle. The morning dragged on. Jessica worked feverishly, answering emails, double-checking documents, keeping one eye on her children. By the time lunch approached, her stomach rumbled, but her worry overshadowed any hunger. The kids, though, needed to eat. She realized with a jolt that she hadn't planned more than a few snacks. The office cafeteria was notoriously expensive, and she didn't have the cash for 3 meals there. While she debated her next move, Marina appeared again, slipping a bundle of snacks into Jessica's desk drawer. Crackers, juice boxes, some fruit. "Don't worry," she said. "I had a few extras." Jessica blinked back a rush of gratitude. She quietly thanked Marina, then set out the snacks for the twins. They scarfed them down, shooting Jessica relieved smiles. The respite was short-lived. The boss emerged from his office, scanning the area. He spotted Jessica by her desk, the twins munching quietly. His gaze was hard, but he merely gave a brusque nod as if to say, "Continue at your own risk." Jessica responded with a forced, polite smile, hoping not to provoke him. She tried to keep the rest of the day incident-free, but in the early afternoon, Lily tripped while carrying a small cup of coffee Jessica had asked her not to touch. It splashed onto a corner of some paperwork near a co-worker's desk, leaving a visible stain. Jessica's heart lurched in panic. She hurried over with tissues, wiping frantically. "I'm so sorry, I'll reprint these pages," she said, her voice trembling. The co-worker frowned but didn't say much, only waving her off in annoyance. Jessica felt tears prick the back of her eyes. She apologized again, then led Lily firmly back to her spot by Jessica's own desk. Time crawled, but eventually the end of the day was in sight. Just as Jessica dared to breathe, a call rang out from the break room. It was the boss, gathering everyone for an announcement. Jessica hurried over, leaving the twins in the care of Marina for a few minutes. The boss stood in front of the coffee machine, clearing his throat. "I've got important news," he said, voice taut. "Nicholas Hart, the billionaire investor, will be visiting our office next week. We expect him to tour each department and speak with staff. We need to be at our absolute best." His gaze swept around the room, uncomfortably landing on Jessica for a fraction of a second before moving on. A murmur rippled through the group. Jessica felt her stomach turn over. This was huge. Nicholas Hart's arrival meant extra scrutiny on everyone. The boss continued, "He's a vital connection for future expansions. Let's just say, if we disappoint him, we can kiss certain projects goodbye. I want no distractions, no mistakes." Jessica's throat tightened. The unspoken message was clear. No children allowed anywhere near the place on such a critical day. She shifted nervously, wishing she could vanish into the floor. After the short meeting ended, she slipped back to her desk, every muscle in her body tense. She prayed her babysitter would recover by then. As Marina handed her the twins, Jessica could see the sympathy in her friend's eyes. "I heard him, Jess," Marina murmured. "We need a perfect show for Mr. Hart. Anything goes wrong, the boss will be looking for someone to blame." She nodded, appreciating Marina's honesty but feeling the noose tighten around her. She packed her belongings, tucking away the twins' scattered crayons and markers. Her boss briefly glanced in her direction as she did so, and she tried to pretend she wasn't trembling. By the time she powered down her computer and prepared to leave, her mind was swimming with worst-case scenarios. If the babysitter stayed sick, what then? She couldn't afford to lose this job. She couldn't afford the rent without it. Yet she also couldn't risk angering her boss on the day Nicholas Hart arrived. She was caught between two grim realities, each threatening to unravel the fragile stability she'd managed to build. Lily yawned, hugging her mother's leg while Liam rubbed his tired eyes. Jessica bent down, gathered them into a hug and muttered, "We'll figure this out, okay?" The children nodded, their trust in her unshakable. She tried to draw strength from that. They made their way to the elevator, shoulders brushing as the three of them squeezed in with other employees. Nobody said much. When they finally reached the lobby, Jessica took a deep breath, steeling herself for the next day. This had been one long battle. Tomorrow promised to be no easier. Out on the sidewalk, the sun had already set, and the neon glow of streetlights offered a ghostly shimmer on the pavement. Jessica tightened her grip on the twins' hands. She had at least made it through without being fired. That was something. As she glanced at her phone, part of her hoped for a miraculous text from the babysitter saying, "All better, I can come tomorrow." But it stayed silent. They reached the bus stop, the twins fighting off yawns. She loaded them onto the bus, found a couple of seats, and watched the city lights blur by, mind churning. Dinner would be a simple affair, whatever was left in the fridge. After that, she'd have to make call after call, searching for someone, anyone, who could watch Liam and Lily soon. Inside her apartment, she helped the twins change into their pajamas. Lily mumbled something about being hungry again, so Jessica offered some leftover soup, quietly praying they had enough for a few days. She was just drying the dishes when her phone buzzed. She picked it up and saw a new text from her babysitter. The message was even worse than she feared. As she packs up for the day, Jessica receives a text. Her babysitter might be out indefinitely. She stares at the twins, realizing tomorrow could be even more complicated, and Nicholas Hart's visit is looming. Jessica's heart plummeted as she read the babysitter's text one more time, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into good news. Instead, the message remained stubbornly the same. "I'm sorry, Jessica, but I'm dealing with a personal emergency and can't work indefinitely." She rubbed her temples, dread seeping through her like a cold draft. There were only a few days left before Nicholas Hart's visit. She had no clue how she'd manage. After putting Liam and Lily to bed, she made call after call, scrolling through her contact list in a desperate search for help. Old acquaintances, distant relatives, everyone was either busy, out of town, or simply too strapped to take on two energetic 5-year-olds at short notice. Exhausted, she finally collapsed onto the worn-out sofa, bills scattered on the coffee table, and let her eyes drift shut. Her mind buzzed with panic, but fatigue claimed her before she could overthink. The next morning came too soon. Alarms blared in the dark, and Jessica sprang up, hazy from the restless night. She tiptoed to the twins' bedroom, gently rousing them. "Time to get up," she whispered. They stirred, blinking at her with sleep-heavy eyes. Once again, she had no choice but to bring them to the office. She hated herself for it, bringing children to a place that treated them like a nuisance. But her meager paycheck was all that stood between them and an eviction notice. Liam looked up while pulling on his sneakers. "Why can't we stay home with Ms. Anna?" he asked, naming the babysitter. "She's not feeling well," Jessica said, keeping her voice even. "We don't have anyone else, buddy, but I promise I'll find a better plan soon." He nodded, though his small face was uncertain. They hurried through a half-eaten breakfast of cereal and bananas, then caught the bus at the usual stop. The commute was no friendlier than the day before. Crowded aisles, stiff faces, loud engine hum. Jessica held the twins close, silently praying they wouldn't cause any scene. She was already picturing the office's reaction, the watchful eyes that would greet her the moment she set foot inside. Upon arriving, she scanned the rows of cubicles. Maybe she could station the kids in a quieter corner, one that wasn't in her boss's direct line of sight. She spotted a cramped, underused office space with a few spare chairs and a tall potted plant half-wilted in the corner. It was slightly out of the main traffic flow, less likely to attract complaints. "All right, guys, this is your spot today," she murmured. The twins dropped their small backpacks. "Try not to leave this room without telling me. I'll bring you snacks soon." Marina, her kind co-worker, popped her head in just then. "Hey, I heard you come in. Are the kids all right?" she asked, voice hushed. Jessica shot her a tired smile. "They'll be okay. Thanks again for yesterday. I'll keep them out of the way." Marina reached into her purse and pulled out a pack of stickers. "Here, might occupy them for a bit." Liam's eyes lit up, and Lily took the stickers with a broad grin. Jessica felt a swell of gratitude. In an office full of critical stares, at least one person understood. The morning started calmly enough. Jessica tackled her inbox, focusing on her tasks with single-minded determination. She was so immersed in spreadsheets that she almost forgot the kids were there. Almost. Then came a sudden hush in the hallway, followed by raised voices from near the break room. Jessica's pulse quickened. She prayed it had nothing to do with the twins. Not 5 minutes later, a co-worker stormed into her cubicle. "Jessica, your son spilled coffee on the server station," she blurted, eyes wide. "He was wandering around, must have knocked the cup off a table. We need you there now." Jessica felt her heart freeze, a surge of panic lancing through her. She rushed down the corridor where a small group had gathered near an open panel brimming with cables and blinking lights. Liam stood in the middle of it, biting his lip, tears forming in his eyes. Sticky coffee droplets trickled down the side of the server. The co-worker's face was flushed, and the tension was palpable. "Mommy, I'm sorry," Liam whimpered. "I was looking for more stickers and I bumped the cup." Jessica crouched next to him. "It's okay," she said in a voice that was trying to be soothing but came out shaky. "We'll fix this." She turned to the co-worker. "How bad is it?" "I have no idea," the co-worker said, exasperated. "We need to check if the data's lost or if the hardware's fried." Fear gripped Jessica. If the damage was irreversible, this could be the last straw for the boss, and for her job. While the co-worker ran to fetch the IT manager, Jessica eyed the server. She recalled a conversation with an IT intern about backups. something about a daily mirrored copy. If that was correct, there might be a chance to salvage critical information. She turned to Liam. "Stay right here, okay? Don't move." Then she darted to the IT station at the end of the corridor. There, she recognized the small sign that read, "Backup System." On a nearby monitor, lines of code indicated the daily backups had run just a few hours ago. Relief flickered inside her like a candle flame. She tried her best to navigate the system, carefully following what she remembered from that chat with the intern. Her hands trembled, heart thundering in her chest, but she managed to initiate a restore from the most recent backup. Within minutes, a progress bar popped up, verifying that core files were still intact. She dashed back to the coworker, who was now examining the sticky puddle on the server hardware with the IT manager. "I think I started a restore," Jessica said. "Check the system logs." The IT manager raised an eyebrow, then hurried to the nearest terminal. A few tense minutes passed. At last, he nodded. "Looks like the important data is still safe. Hardware might be salvageable if we clean it properly, but the files themselves, they're intact. Nice work." Jessica nearly sagged with relief. One potential disaster contained. A small wave of murmurs ran through the onlooking staff, including a few who had probably expected a meltdown. She allowed herself the briefest smile, then felt Liam tug at her sleeve. "I'm really sorry, Mommy," he whispered. She gathered him into a hug. "It's okay. Let's get you back to your sister." She ushered him towards the makeshift corner office where Lily waited, her expression full of worry. By the time the situation calmed, word reached the boss's ears. He marched up, face stormy, and scanned the scene. Sizing up the coffee-stained server, he turned to Jessica with a withering stare. "We can't keep having incidents like this," he said, voice low. "But at least you contained the damage. The next time you bring these kids to work, you'd better be prepared to handle the consequences." His tone was sharper than ever. Jessica winced. "I understand," she said quietly. "I'm doing my best, sir." He let out a sharp breath, then waved her away as if the sight of her was irritating. The tension lingered like a stale odor long after he strode off. Yet Jessica felt a tiny surge of pride. She'd salvaged the data. Even if her situation was precarious, her quick action had prevented a catastrophe. Marina approached during a lull in the afternoon, offering a supportive pat on Jessica's shoulder. "Nice save," she said. "People noticed. Just be careful, okay? The boss won't give you infinite chances." Jessica nodded, her thoughts caught between relief and fear. The kids were bored and restless, but she made sure they stayed glued to that tiny corner room for the rest of the day. She'd nearly lost her job once already this morning. She had no strength for another crisis. As evening approached, she was exhausted and more than ready to leave, but the boss dropped another bombshell. He approached her cubicle, arms folded, expression stern. "I expect to see those children gone by the time Nicholas Hart visits next week," he said. "No slip-ups, no accidents. Understood?" Jessica swallowed, nodded. "Yes, I'll make sure of it." He walked away without another word, leaving her with the full weight of her dilemma. The day ended on that ominous note. She gathered up Liam and Lily, both of them yawning from a long day of forced quiet and nervous energy. Together, they made their way out of the building, stepping into the cool evening air. Jessica paused under a street lamp and checked her phone's banking app, hoping a random deposit or financial miracle might appear. Her heart sank. Her balance was perilously low, almost zero. She had no idea how she'd find or pay for a replacement babysitter in time for Nicholas Hart's high-stakes visit. On her phone, Jessica checks her bank balance. It's almost empty. She has no idea how she'll hire help in time for Nicholas Hart's high-stakes visit. Jessica perched on the edge of her couch, her eyes scanning the list of contacts in her phone for the third time that night. The apartment was deathly quiet except for the low hum of traffic outside. Liam and Lily were finally asleep, oblivious to the bills piled on the coffee table and their mother's shaking hands. Her babysitter was still out of commission, and all Jessica could think was how she had no means, financial or otherwise, to find a stand-in. The flickering overhead light only added to her unease. She rubbed her temples and resolved to call her mother, even though she knew in her gut it wouldn't help much. With a shaky sigh, she dialed the familiar number. The phone rang several times before her mother answered, sounding tired. "Jess? It's late. Is everything okay?" her mother asked, concern creeping into her voice. "No, not really," Jessica admitted. She could almost picture her mother's lined face scrunching up with worry. "The babysitter's out indefinitely, and the kids, I just have no one else to watch them. Work is on me about it. I'm barely scraping by. I don't know what else to do." There was a heavy pause, filled with the static of the weak connection. Then her mother sighed. "Sweetheart, I wish I could be there for you. But money's tight here too, and I'm 3 states away. You know I'd help if I could." Jessica managed a tight smile into the phone, although she knew her mother couldn't see it. "I know. It's okay," she said quickly, wanting to spare her mother the guilt. "I just thought maybe you had ideas." They talked in circles for a while. No immediate solution surfaced. Jessica hung up with a swirl of dread still gnawing at her insides. Her entire body felt like a coiled spring ready to snap. All she could do was try to get some sleep. She never heard the light knock on her front door, so when it came again, louder, she jolted upright. Heart pounding, she crossed the tiny living room and opened the door a crack. Standing there was her elderly neighbor, Donna Marta, wrapped in a faded cardigan, her gray hair pinned neatly in a bun. "Jessica, sorry to bother you so late," Donna Marta said softly, glancing past her at the dim apartment. "I heard you talking and crying earlier. Is everything all right?" Heat flushed Jessica's cheeks. She hadn't realized her voice carried so easily through the thin walls. "I'm fine," she lied. Then her composure wavered. "Actually, no, I'm not." Donna Marta smiled gently, the kind of smile that could only come from someone who'd lived through her own share of hardships. "I know how hard it can be raising children on your own. I raised my grandson alone for years." She reached out and patted Jessica's arm. "If you ever need help with your twins during the day, I'm free most mornings and afternoons. Not for free, mind you, but I won't charge like the agencies. A little extra would help me too." Jessica's eyes brimmed with tears of relief. "Oh, thank you," she whispered. "I don't have much to pay, but anything is better than the office discovering I keep bringing my kids in." Donna Marta nodded, her expression warm. "We'll work something out. Let's talk tomorrow, yes?" And with that, she gave Jessica's arm another pat and slipped back into the hallway. Jessica closed the door, heart thrumming. It wasn't a perfect fix. She still had to figure out how to squeeze payment for childcare out of her nearly empty bank account, but it was a flicker of hope she hadn't had 10 minutes ago. The next morning, she crept into the twins' bedroom, feeling lighter than she had all week. Liam and Lily roused with their usual mix of yawns and curiosity. Over a hurried breakfast, Jessica explained that Donna Marta would watch them while she went to work, at least for a short while. "Is she nice?" Lily asked, bright-eyed. "She's very nice," Jessica assured her, remembering the kindly neighbor's gentle tone. "But you have to behave. She's doing us a big favor." When they arrived at Donna Marta's apartment just down the hall, the older woman ushered the twins in with a welcoming smile. The scent of cinnamon and warm milk greeted them. Jessica caught a glimpse of a neatly kept living room, a crocheted blanket folded over the couch. It felt safe, more comforting than she'd expected. "Go on, kids," Donna Marta said. "I have coloring books on the table. We can watch cartoons, too." Jessica stooped to hug them goodbye. Lily nestled against her neck, and Liam gave a quick squeeze before darting to examine the coloring books. Jessica mouthed another thank you to Donna Marta, who nodded in understanding. Then she hurried out the door, relieved yet anxious all the same. At the office, for the first time in days, Jessica walked in without 2 little shadows trailing her. The sense of normalcy felt surreal. She headed straight for her desk, booted up her computer, and dove into the backlog of emails that had piled up while she'd been juggling crises. Every so often she'd pause to check her phone, but no urgent texts lit the screen. Her children were safely in someone else's care. A half-hour later, the boss called a quick meeting. Jessica joined her co-workers in the main hallway where he announced that Nicholas Hart's visit was still scheduled for next week, but hints had surfaced that he might appear any time between now and then. Nervous glances shot around the group. The boss demanded everyone be at peak performance, numbers accurate, proposals polished. One slip, he reminded them, and they might lose the investors' interest. Jessica's heart pounded. But this time, she wasn't quite as panicked. At least today she wasn't risking another coffee spill from Lily's hands or Liam wandering into restricted areas. She kept her head down, diligently working, pausing only to sip water or answer the occasional question from a co-worker. Every so often she'd look up to see Marina offering a supportive smile from across the room. Around lunch, Jessica's phone finally buzzed. Donna Marta was calling. Jessica's fingers clenched. She ducked into an empty conference room to answer. "Hello? Is everything okay?" "I'm afraid Lily's running a fever," Donna Marta said, concern in her voice. "I've given her some children's acetaminophen, but she's not looking well. I think you should come home if you can." A wave of worry coursed through Jessica. "All right. I'll be there as soon as I can." She hurried back to her desk to shut down her computer, certain the boss would disapprove. Still, Lily's health came before anything else. When she told her boss she had to leave, he frowned. "Again? Jessica, do I need to remind you?" She held her breath, hands shaking. "I know. I'm sorry. It's my daughter. She's sick, and I can't leave her alone. I'll finish my tasks from home if possible, or I can come in early tomorrow." He ground his teeth for a moment, then waved her away. "Fine. Go. But be prepared for an intense schedule tomorrow. We can't have these emergencies every other day." Jessica nodded, breathless with relief. She raced out, hopped on the first available bus, and anxiously watched the city blocks flash by, all the while picturing Lily's flushed cheeks. When she finally reached Donna Marta's apartment, Lily lay curled on the couch, looking miserable. Liam sat beside her, offering a warm compress for her forehead under Donna Marta's guidance. "Thank you for calling me," Jessica murmured. She knelt to brush Lily's damp hair aside, feeling the heat on her daughter's skin. "She kept saying her stomach hurts," Donna Marta explained softly, and then the fever came on. With some coaxing, Jessica got Lily to take sips of water. After a few minutes, she carried her daughter back to their own place, Liam trailing close behind. The older woman wished them luck, promising to check in later. Jessica settled Lily into bed, fed her some mild soup, and tucked her under a light blanket. She sighed, realizing she'd have to juggle work from home if possible. Deadlines were looming, and the boss had made it clear how fragile her position was. As evening fell, Lily's fever still hovered uncomfortably high, so Jessica made space on the couch, letting her rest there where she could keep a close watch. Liam brought Lily a stuffed bunny and gently placed it beside her. Darkness closed in outside. Jessica switched on a single lamp, the golden glow illuminating Lily's flushed face. She dabbed a cool washcloth over Lily's forehead, heart heavy with worry and exhaustion. Thoughts of Nicholas Hart's visit flickered through her mind like a distant thunderstorm. There was no telling if he'd show up the next day or next week, but either scenario posed a challenge. Soon, Lily's breathing eased and she drifted into a shallow sleep. Jessica stroked her cheek, then closed her eyes, letting her own head lean against the back of the couch. She prayed for a moment's reprieve, anything to give them hope that tomorrow wouldn't bring more disasters. Suddenly, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She grabbed it, squinting at the screen in the dim light. A text from a coworker, simple but ominous. "Rumor is Mr. Hart might show up tomorrow morning. Prepare yourself." As Jessica soothes Lily to sleep, her phone buzzes. A co-worker's cryptic text warns her that the big investor might arrive first thing tomorrow, not next week. Jessica woke long before sunrise, her phone's alarm slicing through the uneasy quiet of her apartment. The first sensation she felt was the dull ache of worry lingering in her chest. Lily had spent most of the night with a fever, so Jessica had been up and down, coaxing sips of water, cool compresses, and plenty of rest. She glanced at her daughter, asleep on the couch, tiny chest rising and falling under a light blanket. Liam still dozed in his bedroom, though his small brow seemed creased even in slumber. She tiptoed across the living room and pressed the back of her hand gently to Lily's forehead. Warm, but not alarming. It was a slight improvement. Jessica exhaled, relieved she didn't feel the scorching heat from the day before. One crisis partially under control, she reminded herself. But the message from her co-worker echoing in her mind would not be so easily calmed. Nicholas Hart might arrive first thing this morning. Her boss had already made it clear he expected perfection if the billionaire showed up. Jessica couldn't risk any more slip-ups, no tardiness, no distractions. But Lily was still weak, and Jessica hated the thought of leaving her. Then a soft knock sounded on the door, and Jessica found Donna Marta standing in the corridor, a small pot of homemade soup in her hands. "I thought Lily might need some nourishment," the older woman said gently, stepping inside. "How is she today?" Jessica offered a shaky smile. "Her fever's gone down. Thank you, Donna Marta, for everything." She gestured toward Lily. "I hate to leave her, but I have no choice. Are you sure you can watch both kids until I'm back?" Donna Marta nodded, setting the pot on the stove. "Absolutely. Don't worry. I've got a doctor's appointment tomorrow, but today I'm free. Go focus on your job. I'll call if anything changes." Grateful beyond words, Jessica slipped into her bedroom to change into her neatest blouse and slacks. She braided her hair and applied a quick bit of makeup to hide the dark circles under her eyes. If Nicholas Hart really did appear at the office, she wanted to look presentable, not haggard or frazzled. Though her heart still felt like it was pounding in her throat, she managed to steady her breathing. She had to hold it together. By the time she emerged, Donna Marta was spoon-feeding Lily small amounts of soup. Liam was awake, sitting beside them, carefully touching his sister's arm to comfort her. Jessica's chest tightened at the sight. She loved how they cared for each other. "Mommy has to go to work," she said gently, crouching to Lily's eye level. "I'll call and check on you, okay?" Lily nodded. She looked pale, but no longer flushed with fever. Liam just squeezed his mother's hand. "It'll be okay, Mom." She kissed them both, thanked Donna Marta once more, and hurried out the door into the cold morning air. The walk to the bus stop was nerve-wracking. She clutched her phone in case it rang, scanning every step as though the slightest delay might ruin her. On the bus, she got jostled by the crowd, but her mind wasn't on the cramped ride. She was rehearsing how to keep a low profile when Nicholas arrived. Upon reaching the office lobby, the atmosphere felt charged. Co-workers bustled around, some adjusting their ties, others smoothing out wrinkles in their skirts. Rumors about Nicholas Hart's presence fluttered in every corner. Jessica passed the security desk, where the guard gave her a nod. Upstairs, she spotted Marina and caught the quick arch of her friend's eyebrows. "He's already here," that look seemed to say. Jessica's heart thumped. She set her purse in a drawer and logged into her computer, hands trembling slightly on the keyboard. The boss, with his usual frown, stalked the floor, reminding everyone to stay on task, no chatter. Jessica ducked her head, trying to vanish behind her screen. She couldn't afford a single misstep. An hour crawled by, then 2. She glanced at the clock repeatedly, feeling both dread and curiosity. Where was Nicholas Hart? Was he in some private meeting upstairs or inspecting another department? The office remained tense, quiet, except for the sounds of typing, the occasional phone ring, and her own racing pulse. Mid-morning, someone cleared their throat. Jessica looked up to see the boss standing at the edge of her cubicle, looking more agitated than usual. He motioned for her to follow. and she felt a lurch of panic. Silently, she rose and trailed him down the hallway toward the conference room. The door was ajar, and inside stood a tall, impeccably dressed man examining a table strewn with charts and reports. Nicholas Hart. There was no doubt about it. His presence was magnetic, and the atmosphere in the room shifted the moment Jessica entered. He wore a crisp suit, eyes sharp and inquisitive. His posture radiated confidence as though he'd seen it all before, yet he still seemed genuinely curious about the office's operations. "This is one of our key contributors," the boss said briskly. "Jessica is part of the team that oversees data coordination. She's been resourceful." Nicholas turned, offering the faintest smile. "Resourceful is good." His voice was calm, rich in tone. He extended a hand. "Pleasure to meet you." Jessica's mind flitted between panic over Lily's condition and the surreal moment of shaking hands with a billionaire. She managed a polite greeting, determined not to betray how frayed her nerves felt. The boss quickly steered the conversation, pointing to a project plan pinned on the wall, while Nicholas listened, occasionally nodding. Trying to fade into the background, Jessica kept silent. Her phone, safely tucked in her pocket, felt like a ticking bomb. If Dona Marta called with bad news, it would ring at the worst possible time. She could almost see her boss's furious face if that happened. Yet Lily was her priority. Jessica knew she had to be ready for any update. The meeting wrapped up, Nicholas offering a few pointed questions. Jessica answered quietly, focusing on giving concise, accurate responses. But underneath it all, she sensed a flicker of curiosity in his gaze whenever he looked her way. It was almost as if he saw past the polished exterior she fought to maintain. By lunchtime, Nicholas had moved on to another department, followed by the boss. Jessica found Marina in the corridor, who immediately asked, "How'd it go?" She shrugged, exhaling a shaky breath. "He seems polite, professional, but I felt like I was on trial." She flicked her gaze around, paranoid. "Any news if he's staying all day?" Marina shrugged. "Probably. Everyone's acting like we've got a royal visitor." They parted ways, and Jessica ducked into a quiet nook to call Dona Marta and check on Lily. Her heart hammered with each ring, terrified of the news she might hear. But when Dona Marta answered, her voice was warm. "She's doing better, dear. Fever's still down. She had some soup and is resting." Relief bloomed in Jessica's chest. "Thank goodness. Let me know if anything changes." She stepped out of the nook, only to nearly collide with Nicholas himself, who must have just turned down the hallway. His swift reflexes kept them from bumping. Jessica stammered an apology. He gave her that thoughtful glance again, the corner of his mouth curving in a faint half-smile. "No harm done," he said softly. "Everything all right?" She nodded, cheeks flushing. "Yes, sir. Fine. Just stepping away for a quick call." The last thing she wanted was to reveal she had a sick daughter at home. Nicholas's eyes lingered for a moment, as if he sensed her unease, but he said nothing more. With a courteous nod, he continued down the corridor. Jessica let out the breath she'd been holding. That was far too close. The boss, standing nearby, shot her a stern look that said, "Back to work." She didn't need a second warning. The rest of the day passed in a blur of tension. Nicholas roamed different departments, sometimes pausing to chat with employees. His presence felt unavoidable, like a looming shadow. Yet Jessica managed to keep her head down, only interacting with him when absolutely necessary. Anytime she sensed him approaching, her stomach did a nervous flip. She didn't want to appear incompetent or, worse, reveal her personal life at such a critical moment. Finally, as afternoon stretched on, Nicholas began to wrap up his visit. A few staff members escorted him toward the elevators, and Jessica caught a final glimpse of him from across the open floor. He paused, sweeping his gaze over the cubicles, until his eyes landed on her. Just for a second, their gazes locked. His contained a hint of curiosity, maybe even concern. The moment felt oddly personal for such a large, bustling office. Then he turned and stepped into the elevator, leaving Jessica rooted in place, heart pounding. The hush that followed was tangible. Everyone seemed to exhale in relief all at once. He was gone, at least for the day. The boss began barking orders for cleanup, insisting on immediate follow-ups. Jessica's phone buzzed again, and this time she answered right at her desk. Donna Marta's voice came through. "She's a bit fussy again. Might be the fever creeping back. You might want to leave early." Jessica's guilt spiked. She glanced around. Could she afford to leave now? Then she spotted the boss returning, shoulders stiff, clearly stressed. This was going to be a delicate decision, but Lily needed her. There was no question. Just before leaving, Nicholas looks back at Jessica with a quizzical, almost concerned expression, hinting he notices more than anyone realizes. Jessica spent most of that night replaying Nicholas's quizzical glance in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that he had noticed something deeper. Her stress, her exhaustion, maybe even the secrets lurking below the office's polished surface. After she got home, she found Lily sleeping soundly, thanks to Donna Marta's attentive care, and Liam curled up beside her in a protective gesture. Relief seeped through Jessica as she felt Lily's forehead, still a bit warm, but nothing like the fever of days past. At least that crisis had calmed for the moment. Morning arrived with a pinkish glow edging through the windows. Jessica carefully checked Lily's temperature again, low-grade fever, but not alarming. She gave her more water and medicine, then watched her nibble some dry toast. Liam was already dressed, eyes bright with concern. The plan for the day was simple. Jessica would go to work, and Donna Marta would watch both kids. Even so, Jessica's stomach churned. She sensed new storms gathering on the horizon. Once she reached the office, the usual rush of greetings felt laced with tension. Whispers of an upcoming big meeting scuttled through the hallways like nervous insects. Nicholas Hart had made his unexpected visit, but rumor was he'd be back in a few days to finalize his decision. Some said it was merely a formality, a chance to sign contracts, while others insisted the deal was far from certain. Jessica noticed the hushed conversations and uneasy looks. Something was off. After settling at her desk, she passed a cluster of co-workers by the coffee machine. Their voices dipped lower as she approached. She caught snippets. Overages. Missing funds. Blame it on the boss. The words pricked her ears. It sounded like someone was trying to set up the department head, her boss, for failure. Jessica's heart fluttered in alarm. Hadn't Nicholas mentioned wanting strong leadership in the company? If there was sabotage afoot, it might torpedo the deal and threaten everyone's job, hers included. She inhaled, trying to keep calm. Getting involved in office politics was the last thing she wanted. She needed stability and a paycheck, not drama. But as she returned to her desk, a co-worker, a lanky man named Edgar, brushed past her and hissed, "Hey, be careful, they're looking for a scapegoat." She stopped in her tracks, eyes wide. "What do you mean?" she whispered. He shrugged, glancing around nervously. "Something's off in finance. Budgets aren't adding up. If Nicholas finds out, heads will roll. Some folks might throw you or the boss under the bus." He swiftly moved on before she could ask more. All day, her heart pounded every time someone walked by. She buried herself in spreadsheets, double-checking formulas and making sure her department's figures were correct. Around midday, she paused for a quick snack at her desk and noticed a file blinking in a shared drive. Project Heart, Sales Data. She clicked it open out of curiosity, hoping to see if everything aligned. Instead, confusion set in. The data was partial, riddled with gaps, nowhere near the detail Nicholas would expect. Worse, she recognized some of the numbers. They'd been rearranged or omitted entirely from the official record. Jessica frowned, adrenaline kicking in. If Nicholas saw these incomplete figures, he'd think the company was incompetent or, worse, hiding something. She realized that if the final pitch to Nicholas used faulty data, the entire deal could crumble. Her mind raced. Could this be the sabotage people were hinting at? Marina stopped by and Jessica gestured for her to look. "This can't be right," Jessica whispered, scrolling through the incomplete fields. "Somebody must have altered or removed the real numbers." Marina's eyes widened. "This is bad. Have you told the boss?" "Not yet," Jessica muttered. "But we need to fix this before Nicholas returns, or we're all in trouble." Determined, she copied the suspicious file onto a USB drive to compare with older versions. The more she pieced together, the more certain she became that someone was doctoring the figures, maybe to shift blame around. Her stomach twisted with dread. She didn't know who she could trust, let alone if her boss would even listen. After a long afternoon of tension, she finally mustered the courage to approach the boss's office. He was on a terse phone call, face etched with stress, but motioned her in anyway. The moment he hung up, Jessica held out the USB drive. "I found incomplete data for the Heart project. It's pretty serious. Could undermine the whole pitch." He let out a weary sigh. "I'm aware there are issues with some files, but we have bigger fish to fry, and it's not your place to meddle in departmental data you don't manage. Stick to your tasks." Jessica's pulse pounded. "But sir, if Nicholas sees these errors—" He cut her off with a slice of his hand. "Do not overstep. I have it under control. Do your job, Jessica." He offered no further explanation and dismissed her with a wave, turning to his computer as though she were no more than a passing nuisance. Jessica retreated, anger and worry mingling in her chest. How could he ignore something so urgent? For all she knew, he might be in on whatever scheme was happening, or maybe he was simply overwhelmed. Either way, she couldn't just pretend everything was fine. As she stepped out of the boss's office, a different co-worker sidled up to her, a woman named Clarice, known for spreading the juiciest rumors. "You didn't hear it from me, but some folks from accounting are planning to shift blame if the numbers don't add up," Clarice whispered, glancing around. "They'll point fingers at your boss or your department. Don't let them scapegoat you." Jessica swallowed. The warning struck home. She remembered Edgar's earlier comment, the looks from the people by the coffee machine. Something bigger was brewing, and she was stuck in the crossfire. If Nicholas canceled the investment, the company might downsize, and she could lose her job. By the end of the day, Jessica had spent hours poring over old versions of the files, pulling together evidence that the data had once been correct but was now suspiciously altered. She stored it all on a USB drive and quietly emailed herself a copy. If the worst happened, she might need proof to protect herself. Around her, co-workers trickled out, eager to escape the tension. Jessica stayed behind, eyes gritty with fatigue. She wasn't sure what she'd do with these files yet, but she refused to be caught unprepared. Near 7 o'clock, she finally shut down her computer, drew the USB from the port, and slipped it into her purse. The office was eerily quiet, most of the lights dimmed for the night. Just as she headed toward the elevators, she sensed movement in her peripheral vision. Someone lurking by the row of cubicles, thin silhouette, arms crossed, face partially hidden in the shadow. Her breath caught. She recognized the co-worker who always seemed to resent her. He had openly sneered when she brought the twins to the office. His eyes bored into her now, cold and narrowed. Jessica forced a neutral expression, pressing the elevator button. The doors slid open, and she stepped inside, heart hammering as the co-worker remained in place, glaring silently. The doors closed, separating them, but not before a chill crept up her spine. She clutched her purse, suddenly very aware that the USB drive was in there, containing proof of wrongdoing. Maybe this co-worker was involved. Maybe half the office was. She felt vulnerable, all her anxieties swirling at once. Stepping into the elevator, Jessica spots the resentful co-worker glaring at her. She realizes there might be real danger in exposing sabotage before Nicholas returns. Morning light filtered through Jessica's thin curtains, and for a moment she wished she could hide from the day. The apartment was still except for the gentle hum of traffic outside, but her mind churned with all the worries that had piled up overnight. She remembered the resentful glare of that co-worker in the office, how he'd stood there in the shadows, almost daring her to do something about the crooked data she'd discovered. It sent a chill through her. She pushed the blankets aside, got up, and went to check on the twins. Liam and Lily were awake, still groggy-eyed, blinking at the cartoons on TV. She attempted a weary smile. "Hey, kiddos, how'd you sleep?" Liam shrugged. "I dreamed I was a superhero," he said softly. Lily just rubbed her eyes, yawning. Jessica's phone chimed. She picked it up with a flicker of hope that it might be good news. Maybe Donna Marta was free all day to watch the twins. Instead, the text read, "So sorry my appointment is this afternoon. I can only keep them until lunchtime." A sigh escaped Jessica's lips. It looked like she'd have to bring the kids to work for half the day again, at least until Donna Marta could return and pick them up. Part of her wanted to risk leaving them at home for a few hours, but that was impossible. Lily and Liam were too young to be left alone. She could practically hear the boss's furious voice if he found out the twins were coming back, but she had no other option. "All right, loves," she said. "You'll stay with Donna Marta this morning, then you'll have to come with me to the office for a bit until she can pick you up. We can't make a scene, though, understood?" Lily pouted. "We'll be quiet." They packed a couple of small backpacks with crayons, snacks, and stuffed animals for the morning. Jessica threw on a blouse and a sensible skirt, then hurried them down the hall to Donna Marta's place. "I'll pick you up at lunchtime," she told the older woman. "Then I'll bring them back here when you're done with your appointment." Donna Marta nodded, sympathy in her eyes. "We'll manage," she said gently, ushering the kids inside. "Just be careful at that office, Jessica. Things seem tense." She hurried off without further explanation, but Jessica knew exactly what she meant. Everyone in the building could sense the strain. Nicholas Hart's upcoming final visit, the whiff of sabotage, the prickly co-workers who resented any sign of weakness. At the office, she tried to slip in unnoticed, taking a seat at her desk and opening her inbox as though everything was normal. The tension was palpable. She caught glimpses of the boss moving around with a clipboard, checking on each person like a nervous sentry. A co-worker whispered in passing that Nicholas might arrive sooner than expected yet again. Nobody really knew for sure. Jessica wanted to focus on her tasks, but her thoughts kept drifting to the suspicious file she'd unearthed. She still had the data proof tucked away on a USB drive. Each time the resentful co-worker passed by her cubicle, she felt his gaze on her back, like a silent threat. She didn't know whether he was the one sabotaging data or just stirring trouble. Either way, she felt uneasy. Eventually, lunchtime rolled around, and Jessica slipped out to retrieve Liam and Lily. They seemed cheerful enough as they hopped along beside her back to the office, but she felt the weight of dread like a rock in her stomach. She found a small, rarely used lounge area to stash them near a stack of old chairs. "We'll only be here a couple of hours," she reminded them softly. "Donna Marta will pick you up as soon as she's done. I just need you to be patient." They nodded earnestly. Jessica tried to settle them in with juice boxes and coloring books. Her heart pounded every time she thought about her boss catching them. But she had no choice. An hour passed quietly enough. Jessica darted back and forth between her desk and the lounge, checking on the twins, answering calls, and scanning emails. But tension flared when she came back from a quick meeting to find Lily missing from the lounge. Alarm raced through her. Liam sat there alone, coloring. "Where's Lily?" Jessica asked, breath caught in her throat. "She said she was thirsty," Liam answered, eyes wide. "She left to find water." Jessica's pulse hammered. She left Liam in the lounge and hurried into the hallway. Sure enough, Lily stood near the break room, just beneath the water cooler. The resentful co-worker had Lily cornered, arms folded, looking thoroughly displeased. Lily looked close to tears. "Lily?" Jessica called. She rushed forward, placing herself protectively in front of her daughter. "Is there a problem?" The co-worker narrowed his eyes. "Children shouldn't be wandering around here. This is exactly the kind of disruption we warned you about." Jessica took Lily's hand. "She just needed water. I'm sorry. I'll take her back right now." but he didn't let it go, stepping closer. "You think this place is a daycare? I don't know why they keep you on. The second you screw up, you're gone. You're a liability." Anger and embarrassment flooded Jessica's cheeks. She saw a few onlookers peeking around corners, drawn by the commotion. Lily squeezed Jessica's hand, eyes brimming with tears. "I'm doing my best," Jessica said, voice shaking but resolute. "Please don't talk to my daughter that way." The co-worker let out a short, mocking laugh. "Your best is not good enough. Not here, not with what's at stake. People like you drag this company down." A sharp retort burned on the tip of Jessica's tongue, but she didn't want to create a scene. She turned to lead Lily away. Then she froze. Standing in the corridor, eyes fixed on the confrontation, was Nicholas Hart, apparently returning for an unannounced follow-up. His face was unreadable, but Jessica sensed he'd witnessed enough to form some impression of what was happening. Silence ballooned, tension crackling like electricity. The co-worker, catching sight of Nicholas, flushed and hastily backed away, trying to adopt a neutral posture. Lily sniffled, leaning against her mother's hip. Nicholas stepped forward. "Is everything all right here?" he asked in a calm but firm tone. Jessica cleared her throat, her voice trembling. "Just a misunderstanding," she managed. "I'm sorry if this is disruptive. My babysitter—" She stopped, realizing she shouldn't make excuses, yet unable to stay silent. Nicholas looked from Jessica to the co-worker. He angled his head at Lily, then returned his gaze to Jessica. "Where is your desk?" he asked quietly. She gestured down the hallway. Nicholas nodded. "Go back there with your daughter. Take a moment. I'll catch up in a bit." He spoke politely, but there was a layer of authority that wasn't to be questioned. Jessica led Lily away, feeling her cheeks burn under the stares of onlookers. When she reached the lounge, she found Liam fiddling with crayons, clearly uneasy. She hugged both kids, trying to compose herself. She wasn't sure how Nicholas would react, or if the boss had witnessed any of it. Moments later, Nicholas strode past, followed by a flustered boss who seemed eager to steer him in another direction. But Nicholas paused near Jessica's cubicle, making direct eye contact. The boss, red-faced, stammered something about apologies for the inconvenience, but Nicholas quietly waved him off. Jessica's heart hammered, not knowing what to expect. She braced for a rebuke. Instead, Nicholas spoke gently, eyes flicking to Liam and Lily. "These are your children?" She nodded, swallowing against the lump in her throat. "Yes, I had no choice but to bring them in today. My babysitter could only watch them half the day." He studied the kids, then returned his gaze to Jessica. "I understand you have your reasons," he said simply. "Sometimes life doesn't fit the standard script." Before she could respond, the resentful co-worker reappeared from behind a row of cubicles, looking like he wanted to reassert himself. Nicholas held up a hand. "Why don't you give us a moment?" he suggested, tone civil but dismissive. The co-worker hesitated, then slunk away, looking annoyed. The boss hovered uncertainly, as though he wanted to interrupt and manage the conversation. Nicholas didn't seem to notice or care, focusing instead on Jessica. Finally, he spoke again, voice quiet enough that only she could hear. "We should talk, in private. I have questions about what's really happening in this company." Jessica breathed in, trying not to let her nerves show. Was this about the sabotage? Or the chaotic scene with her children? Either way, it could change her future in an instant. Nicholas offered a small nod toward a nearby conference room, as if giving her the choice. "I'll make sure your children are comfortable," he added. "If you can spare a few minutes, I'd like to hear the truth from your perspective." Jessica glanced at the boss, who bristled, looking anxious. She had never seen him so off balance. Nicholas's presence was impossible to ignore, and the more the situation unraveled, the clearer it became that the billionaire was far more than just a silent investor. Nicholas asks Jessica to meet him in a private conference room later, stating he wants to hear more about her situation and the company. Jessica's mind spins at the possibilities. and the risks. Jessica felt her heart hammering as she slipped into the small, windowless conference room with Nicholas. He held the door open for her, then closed it quietly, shutting out the bustling noise of the office. Outside, the twins were tucked away in the break area with crayons and juice boxes, watched over by a frazzled Marina and the occasional wary glance from Jessica's resentful co-worker. Inside the room, the lighting was dim. A single fluorescent panel cast a harsh glow on the white table. Nicholas took a seat first, gesturing for Jessica to join him. She settled across from him, fingers twisting in her lap. She couldn't quite believe this was happening. She, a struggling single mother on the brink of financial ruin, was about to have a private conversation with a billionaire investor whose presence could make or break the entire company. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Nicholas seemed in no rush, studying Jessica with a focused calm that made her squirm. She wasn't sure whether to bring up her concerns about the doctored data or her precarious childcare situation, or whether she should keep silent and pray he wouldn't pry. The memory of that co-worker's cruel words still stung in her mind. "Thank you for coming in here," Nicholas began gently. His voice carried a quiet authority that demanded attention without being overbearing. "I appreciate your willingness to talk. I realize this must be unusual for you." Jessica nodded, swallowing. "It is," she admitted. "I'm not used to, well, any of this." He offered a reassuring half-smile. "No need to be nervous. I just want the truth about what goes on in this office. The real truth." His gaze flickered toward the door, as if referencing the tense hallway moments earlier. "I've seen glimpses of stress and disarray here. I've noticed you dealing with more than your fair share." She exhaled, a knot tightening in her chest. "I don't want to cause trouble," she said carefully, "but it's been difficult. My boss has made it clear he's unhappy with me bringing my children in, and there are bigger issues too, ones I'm not sure I have the authority to handle." Nicholas's eyes sharpened with interest. "Such as?" Jessica hesitated. She leaned forward, voice dropping. "There's a project file, critical to the pitch you're reviewing, being tampered with. Numbers missing, data rearranged. It looked like sabotage. I took copies and tried warning my boss, but he shut me down." She paused, nerves raging as she wondered if she'd just sealed her fate. "I have reason to believe some co-workers are planning to use those errors to shift blame, maybe even torpedo the deal." Nicholas didn't appear shocked, which told Jessica he might have suspected something. "Why do you think they'd want to ruin the deal?" he asked, steepling his fingers. She shook her head. "I'm not sure. Maybe it's an internal power struggle. Maybe they think if the investment falls through, certain people stay in control. I'm just a data coordinator. I only found out by accident." He gave a slow nod. "And you think the boss knows more than he admits?" "I suspect so. He told me to mind my own business." Silence sat between them. A phone buzzed in Jessica's pocket, making her flinch. She glanced at Nicholas, who gestured for her to check it. She pulled out her phone and saw a message from Marina. "Kids are restless. Lily says she can't find her crayons." Jessica's stomach clenched with worry. The twins' presence had already caused enough scenes, and now they were apparently fidgeting around in a building with restricted areas and people ready to pounce on any misstep. "I'm sorry," Jessica murmured. "That's about my children. They're—" Nicholas waved a hand, understanding in his expression. "Family is more important than any meeting. You can go to them if you need to." She hesitated. "Thank you, but they're safe with my co-worker for now. We can finish talking first." "All right." He folded his arms across the table, leaning in. "I want to see that file. The one you said was tampered with. Can you show me?" Jessica nodded, rummaging in her purse. She found the small USB drive and placed it on the table, heart pounding. "All the proof is here. It shows the changes from version to version. Whoever did it was clever but not perfect. If you compare the data sets, you'll see the discrepancies. Nicholas picked up the drive carefully, as though it were a piece of evidence. "Thank you," he said, pocketing it. "I'll have my own people look at it. If there's something nefarious going on, I want to know before signing anything." Her shoulders sagged with relief. At least someone in power was taking her concerns seriously. But it also made her uneasy. The stakes felt higher now, as if her discovery placed a target on her back. Suddenly, the conference room door burst open. A frazzled security guard peered in, apologizing for the interruption. "Sir, we have a situation in the restricted archive area," he said breathlessly, glancing at Jessica. "A couple of kids are in there, apparently rummaging around. The alarm got triggered." Jessica's blood turned to ice. "My kids?" she blurted, jumping to her feet. "Oh no, what did they do?" "I'm not sure, ma'am," the guard said. "I just know the system flagged unauthorized movement. They're safe, but we need to clear the area." Nicholas was already on his feet. "Let's go," he said curtly, beckoning Jessica to follow. Heart in her throat, Jessica raced through the corridor. She spotted a small crowd gathering near a locked door with a red security panel blinking ominously. Liam and Lily stood just inside, looking terrified. Marina hovered nearby, hands clasped in dismay. The resentful co-worker, arms folded, smirked at the scene. Jessica could almost hear his thoughts. Perfect ammunition against her. "Mommy!" Lily cried. She and Liam sprinted out the moment they spotted Jessica, burying their faces in her skirt. "Oh my goodness," Jessica whispered, kneeling to clutch them. "Are you two okay? What were you doing in there?" Liam looked close to tears. "We were trying to find Lily's crayons. We didn't know we weren't allowed." The boss stormed forward, red-faced. "Children in a restricted area? This is unacceptable." His glare pinned Jessica, voice rising. "You've jeopardized the security of important documents. How many times do I have to say it? This is an office, not a daycare center." Nicholas stepped in, calm but firm. "I'll handle this, thank you," he said, directing a meaningful look at the boss. "Let's confirm no harm was done." He turned to the security guard. "Have we lost anything sensitive?" The guard checked a handheld device. The alarm triggered as soon as they entered. The kids didn't have time to do anything but rummage through a few old boxes. Looks like no serious damage. Still, it's against protocol, obviously. Nicholas nodded. "We'll review the security procedures later, find out why a child could even wander in here so easily." The boss spluttered. "They shouldn't have been here in the first place. This is exactly why—" Jessica put an arm around Liam and Lily, who were trembling. She wanted to defend herself, but worry pinned her tongue. She braced for Nicholas to side with the boss, to blame her for this fiasco. Instead, Nicholas fixed the boss with a calm stare. "Why is it that your restricted areas are so accessible that two small children can slip in, unchallenged in broad daylight?" he asked. That question hung in the air, a quiet yet damning indictment. The boss's face darkened. He looked away, muttering something about lack of resources and understaffed security. Jessica held onto her twins, relief mixing with embarrassment. Everyone in the hallway seemed to be watching, waiting for the next move. Nicholas placed a gentle hand on Liam's shoulder, giving him a kind smile. "Are you okay?" The boy managed a tiny nod, wiping tears from his cheeks. Lily clung to Jessica's waist, still sniffling. Nicholas surveyed the scene, then said, "I think we've all had enough excitement. Let's disperse. We'll address the security oversight soon." An uncomfortable mumble rippled through the small gathering. The resentful co-worker scowled, shooting Jessica a dirty look before backing away. The security guard quietly apologized, then hustled off to reset the system. Soon, only Jessica, the twins, Marina, Nicholas, and the boss remained. The boss folded his arms, eyes narrowing at Jessica, but it was clear Nicholas had taken charge of the situation. Jessica swallowed. "I'm sorry," she said softly to Nicholas. "I know how this looks. Thank you for—" Nicholas raised a hand to stop her. "We'll talk more about it," he said gently, meeting her eyes with an expression that felt surprisingly sympathetic. He cast a glance at the boss, who stood there steaming. For now, maybe give your children a moment to catch their breath. Jessica nodded. She guided Liam and Lily down the corridor, taking them to a quieter spot near her desk. Marina followed, offering moral support. Nicholas lingered behind with the boss, apparently planning to have a word, though Jessica couldn't guess how that conversation might go. She could hardly think. The memory of that humiliating fiasco in front of so many people burned hot, but a small voice inside reminded her it could have been worse. If Nicholas hadn't stepped in, if he hadn't pointed out the security flaw, she might have been marched out of the building on the spot. Minutes later, Nicholas approached her again in the corridor, his voice lowered so the twins wouldn't be alarmed. I think we should continue our earlier discussion, he said, but clearly, not here. Before Jessica could respond, he glanced around at the office staff milling about, tension crackling in the air. He leaned closer. Let's talk elsewhere. There's more going on here than meets the eye. Jessica steels herself, wondering if this conversation will save or doom her. Jessica never imagined she'd be sharing the back seat of a sleek black car with a billionaire, yet here she was, quietly giving directions to a modest cafe near her apartment. Nicholas had insisted on meeting in a neutral place, away from eavesdropping co-workers and the constant worry of the children wandering restricted areas. Her palms felt clammy against the soft leather seat. The entire day spun in her mind, a swirl of shame, fear, and a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, Nicholas could help her unravel the chaos. When they arrived, the cafe was nearly empty, just a couple of patrons sipping coffee at corner tables. Soft jazz played overhead. Jessica chose a seat by the window, where pale sunlight seeped through sheer curtains. Nicholas settled across from her, removing his jacket and draping it over a chair. He gestured for her to order whatever she liked, but her appetite was a knot of anxiety. She settled on water and a small pastry, not trusting herself to swallow anything more complicated. "How are your children?" Nicholas asked gently, folding his hands on the table. "I hope they're calmer now." She breathed in, relaxing a fraction at his concern. "They're okay. Marina offered to watch them for a while in the office lounge, and then I sent them back home with Dona Marta. I couldn't risk another scene." Nicholas nodded, gaze steady. "You're worried about them and worried about your job." Her throat tightened. "Yes, I'm barely managing. I'm trying to provide for them, but every day it feels like I'm on the brink of losing everything." She paused, the weight of her confession settling on her. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I know my problems might seem trivial compared to your world." He shifted closer, voice low. "They're not trivial. In fact, your situation is exactly what I need to understand. If I'm going to invest, I want to know how people are really treated, beyond the polished presentations." He studied her face. "Tell me what's truly going on." Jessica twisted the napkin in her lap. Then she let everything spill out. The missed paychecks from her ex, the mounting debt collectors, the sick babysitter, the boss's threats, how the sabotage in the data files could jeopardize the entire company. She explained the co-workers' hostility, how each day felt like walking a tightrope. By the time she finished, her voice quavered with exhaustion. Nicholas listened intently, occasionally nodding, never interrupting. When she paused for breath, he said, "That's a lot for one person to carry." She forced a faint smile. "I don't have much choice. If I lose this job, I lose my apartment, the kids' stability, everything." She took a sip of water, trying to steady her trembling hands. "And if that sabotage scandal erupts, they might need someone to blame." Nicholas exhaled slowly. "I've suspected something was off. Part of the reason I'm investing in smaller companies is to transform them into better workplaces, not just profit machines. But your boss isn't exactly receptive to new ideas, is he?" A bitter laugh escaped her. That's putting it lightly. He runs things through fear, and lately, it's only gotten worse. He leaned back, drumming his fingertips on the table. Could you show me the files again? The ones you copied onto that USB drive? She glanced around the quiet cafe, noticing no curious onlookers, then pulled out the USB from her purse. It's all here, she said, handing it over. Snapshots of the data before and after the changes. The differences are obvious. Nicholas studied the small device, then slid it into his pocket. I'll have my own analysts confirm what you found. If it proves the numbers have been manipulated to sabotage the deal or to frame someone, I'll address it immediately. Jessica swallowed. And if it turns out it's my boss or that co-worker behind it? Then we'll root out the problem, Nicholas replied evenly. I don't invest where integrity is compromised. He paused, then added softly, I admire your courage for bringing this forward. She felt heat prickle her cheeks. I just don't want to be fired, she admitted, voice trembling. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, digging into those files. He leaned forward, gaze serious. You did the right thing. Companies are built on people, Jessica. If they can't protect their own employees, especially someone clearly doing her best, then they don't deserve my support. A spark of relief flared in her chest, but just as she opened her mouth to thank him, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, dread creeping in. It was a call from the office. Sensing her anxiety, Nicholas urged her to answer. On the other end was a senior manager she hardly knew, his tone flat and formal. Jessica, he said, we have a problem. The boss and I need you in the main conference room right away. It's regarding the Heart project. He hung up before she could ask questions. Her gut twisted. She relayed the call to Nicholas, who frowned. They might be confronting you with some new accusation, he murmured. I'll come with you. They slipped out of the cafe, the warm hush replaced by the jarring noise of traffic. Jessica clung to the small hope that Nicholas's presence would shield her from the worst. Upon returning to the office, they found the corridor outside the main conference room buzzing with tension. Employees milled about, whispering, while the resentful co-worker stood near the door, smugness oozing from every pore. Inside, the boss glared from behind a long table, flanked by the senior manager and a few other executives. The moment Jessica stepped in, the boss shoved a stack of papers toward her. Explain this, he demanded, voice tight with anger. Jessica picked up the first page. It was an email thread, supposedly from her account, authorizing the deletion of certain data sets in the Heart project. Her eyes widened in horror. She'd never written or sent such an email. I don't even know what this is, she stammered, scanning the text. The language sounded formal but entirely fake, referencing decisions she never made. This isn't me, it's fabricated. The resentful co-worker piped up from the corner. But it's got your signature, and the timestamps match your work hours. Hard to fake that, don't you think? Her cheeks burned. She turned to the boss, who stared at her like she was a liar. Sir, please listen. This is a setup. It's part of the sabotage I warned you about. He pressed his lips together. Don't you dare accuse me of ignoring sabotage. How do we know you aren't the saboteur, trying to cover your own tracks? Jessica felt faint. The senior manager drummed his fingers on the table, eyes cold. Until we figure out what's going on, you're suspended. Turn in your company badge. She opened her mouth in protest. Please. Then Nicholas stepped forward, a calm yet commanding presence. Let me see those documents, he said, holding out his hand. The boss hesitated but eventually slid them across. Nicholas skimmed the pages, his jaw tightening. Easy to forge an internal email if someone has admin access, Nicholas remarked quietly. His gaze flicked to the resentful co-worker. I've seen similar tactics before. He looked up, voice sharp. You're not suspending anyone based on shaky evidence, not while I'm here. The room bristled with sudden tension. The boss glowered. With respect, Mr. Hart, you're not an employee. It's the management's prerogative to discipline staff. Nicholas's gaze hardened. I am, however, the potential investor, and any disciplinary actions carried out under suspicious circumstances directly affect my decision. If you proceed without due diligence, I walk away from this deal. A murmur rippled through the gathered executives. The boss was visibly furious, but he didn't speak, apparently weighing the threat of losing Nicholas's investment. The resentful coworker shifted, arms crossed, looking uncertain for the first time. Jessica stood there trembling, relief and fear swirling inside her. Nicholas had intervened, but everything hung in the balance. The senior manager, caught between the boss and Nicholas, finally mumbled, "We'll postpone any final decisions until we can verify the evidence." She clutched her hands together, trying not to let tears slip down her cheeks in front of everyone. "Thank you," she whispered. Nicholas turned toward her, voice low. "I'll do my own investigation. In the meantime, hold tight. We'll expose who's really behind this." Moments later, the meeting dissolved in a swirl of hushed arguments and anxious glances. Jessica trailed out of the conference room, her legs weak with tension. Her job was still in limbo. The threat of dismissal hadn't gone away, but at least Nicholas had kept her from immediate termination. She sank into a chair in a quiet corner, covering her face with both hands. The magnitude of the moment took its toll, tears burning in her eyes. Just then, she caught Nicholas's voice from down the hallway. He was speaking quietly to someone on the phone. His tone was resolute. "I'm not leaving until I make sure the right choice is made." She listened, heart pounding, wondering if that choice included her. Morning broke under a hazy sky, the kind that dimmed the sun just enough to set a subdued tone. Jessica woke up feeling like she'd barely slept. Her mind was crowded with all the accusations, the tense meeting, and Nicholas's promise not to leave until he saw justice done. She stretched, hearing the soft sounds of Liam and Lily stirring in the next room. A glance at her phone showed a text from Marina. "Big meeting today. Everyone's on edge. Good luck." She inhaled, forcing down the swell of anxiety. She had to hold it together. Rising, she roused the twins with gentle nudges. Lily rubbed her eyes, letting out a quiet yawn, while Liam looked up at his mother solemnly. It struck Jessica how much they sensed. Even if they didn't understand all the details, they knew something heavy was happening in her world. "Is everything okay now?" Lily asked, voice hopeful. Jessica mustered a smile. "Not yet, sweetheart, but soon." She brushed her daughter's cheek. "I need you both to be really good today, okay? We're almost through this." They dressed quickly. Jessica fed them a simple breakfast, toast with a smear of jam, and checked her phone for updates. No new messages. She couldn't decide if that was good or bad. Once the kids were ready, she walked them down the hall to Donna Marta's apartment. The older woman greeted them with open arms. "Don't worry," Donna Marta assured Jessica, noticing her tense expression. "They'll be fine here." Jessica nodded her thanks, hugging the twins goodbye. She had no idea how the day might end, but at least they'd be safe from the office chaos for a few hours. Then, heart pounding, she made her way to work. Upon stepping inside the building, she felt a grim hush. Co-workers clustered in small groups, whispering. Glances slid in her direction, but no one openly confronted her. It was as though they were waiting for the final verdict. Marina hurried up to her, eyes wide. "They're meeting in the large conference room," Marina said. "Nicholas asked for you specifically. The boss is furious. Something about new evidence he can't refute." Jessica's chest fluttered at the mention of new evidence. Maybe Nicholas had uncovered more proof of who actually manipulated the data. Summoning her courage, she followed Marina's directions. As she neared the large conference room, the resentful co-worker lurked in the hallway, arms folded like a guard dog. Jessica forced herself to walk straight past him, ignoring the malevolent glare. Inside, the boss sat at the head of a long table looking unsettled. The senior manager, a few other executives, and Nicholas were there as well. When Jessica entered, Nicholas gestured for her to take the seat beside him. The boss's lip twitched, and the resentful coworker slunk in behind her, staying near the door. "Jessica," Nicholas began in a clear, measured tone, "thank you for joining us. We have some findings to discuss regarding the alleged data tampering." She clenched her hands under the table. "I understand." Nicholas glanced at an older man sitting next to him, a consultant or analyst, perhaps. The man cleared his throat and looked down at a folder. "We compared each version of the files from your USB drive with the official records in the company's system. Our analysis indicates that someone used administrative privileges to fabricate an internal email under Jessica's name, authorizing data deletion." A ripple of reactions swept the room. The boss's jaw set in a tight line. The resentful coworker at the door stiffened, face paling. Jessica tried to keep her composure. For the first time since all this began, she sensed a shift in power, as though the truth was finally coming to light. Nicholas turned to the boss. "I find it troubling that Jessica was nearly suspended based on falsified evidence, don't you?" The boss sputtered. I wasn't aware it was falsified. We had no reason to doubt the authenticity. If someone framed her, we need to identify the culprit." His gaze darted around, landing on each face as if searching for who to blame. But Jessica noticed he carefully avoided looking at the resentful coworker. The analyst sighed. "We traced the login credentials used during the time of the forgery. They belong to—" He flipped a page. "George Reynolds." He nodded toward the resentful coworker by the door. All eyes pivoted to the man, who had lost his smug expression. A dark flush spread across his cheeks. "That's not possible," he stammered. I've been set up." Jessica felt a tremor of relief. This was the man who had made her feel so small, who had cornered Lily near the water cooler, who had glared at Jessica with such contempt. Now he stood in the spotlight. The boss looked dumbstruck. Nicholas, however, appeared unsurprised. The coworker tried to dig himself out of the hole. "Yes, I have admin privileges, but anyone could have borrowed them. It doesn't mean I did this." The analyst shook his head. "There's a record of your personal key fob being used to access the server room at the exact time the email was created, and your terminal ID was signed in. The evidence is conclusive." A heavy hush blanketed the conference room. The coworker's eyes darted in panic. Finally, he gave a bitter sneer. "Fine," he muttered. "So what if I changed a few numbers? This company's going down the drain anyway. We don't need some outside billionaire controlling our future." Nicholas's face hardened, but he kept his voice steady. "You nearly destroyed a colleague's life for your personal agenda. That's unacceptable." The boss, regaining his composure, stood abruptly. "George, hand over your badge. You're relieved of your duties, effective immediately. We'll determine further legal action once our lawyers review the case." George's sneer collapsed into a scowl. He glanced at Jessica one last time, resentment boiling in his eyes, then threw his badge on the table and stormed out. The door slammed. A collective exhale rippled through the room. Jessica found herself blinking back tears. The wave of relief was overwhelming. Nicholas turned to her, expression soft. "I'm sorry you were put through this. Clearly you were right all along." She swallowed, nodding. The boss opened his mouth as if to say something, but words failed him. Then, as if remembering Nicholas's central role here, the boss forced a polite tone. "Mr. Hart, I hope this resolves your concerns." Nicholas regarded him thoughtfully. "My concerns about the data, yes, but now I have a larger concern about workplace culture, how it allowed a loyal employee like Jessica to be threatened, nearly fired, for someone else's wrongdoing." He let that sink in before adding, "I invest in places that treat their people with dignity. I'm willing to sign if we establish new guidelines protecting employees, especially those who juggle responsibilities like childcare." A flicker of frustration crossed the boss's face, but he nodded, likely unwilling to lose the deal. "We can make those adjustments," he said stiffly. Jessica felt her heart flutter. Her job was safe, and more than that, something fundamental might change for the better. The meeting concluded with a wave of relieved chatter. Executives filed out, each murmuring something about updated protocols. The boss quickly retreated to his office, leaving Nicholas alone with Jessica. She rose from her seat, smoothing her skirt. "Thank you," she said softly, voice catching. "If you hadn't intervened—" Nicholas shook his head. "No need to thank me. You did the hard part, holding on to the truth when no one else would listen. That's courage." A small, relieved laugh escaped her. "All I want is to do right by my kids, provide for them, give them a stable future." He considered her words. "I think you're about to see changes in how this company operates, and if you ever need better opportunities, I hope you'll remember we had this conversation." A warm smile touched his lips. Talented, dedicated people are always an asset. Jessica felt a surge of hope that she hadn't allowed herself in ages. Her phone buzzed. It was Donna Marta, letting her know that Lily and Liam were anxious to see her. Jessica excused herself, and Nicholas walked her to the elevator. Later that afternoon, back at her apartment, she opened the door to find the twins waiting eagerly. The second they saw her, they rushed forward with bright-eyed grins. "Mommy, you're back!" Lily cried, hugging her legs. Liam was not far behind, hugging her from the other side. Jessica knelt, scooping them into her arms. They'd barely settled on the worn couch when a soft knock sounded. She opened the door to find Nicholas, looking a bit out of place in the modest hallway. "I needed to deliver something," he said, holding out a small envelope. "It's a personal gesture to help with child care expenses until the new policies are in place." Jessica felt her eyes brim with tears. "That's unbelievably kind." He crouched, meeting Liam and Lily at eye level. "You must be Liam. And Lily, right?" They nodded, all shyness forgotten as they recognized him from the office. In an unexpected moment of joy, the twins threw their arms around Nicholas in a spontaneous hug, as though welcoming an old friend. Jessica watched, heart full. Nicholas gently ruffled Liam's hair, telling Jessica, "You showed everyone what true determination looks like. This is just the beginning." If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.